Christian Recorders Dialogue. I'm so thrilled to be back with you. For those of you I have not met or for joining us for the first time, my name is Antoine C. Wright. I reside in the 7th Episcopal District, where my bishop is probably one of the best bishops, next to my uncle, of course, the bishop in the 9th Episcopal District. But Bishop Samuel Green and Supervisor Green, I'm thankful for their leadership, and certainly to my uncle, Bishop Harry L. C. Wright and Supervisor C. Wright. Thank you for your friendship, and thank you for being one of the best uncles God could ever give a boy from Swansea, South Carolina. We thank you all so much for joining us. As always, please put in the chat line your home church and the district where you reside, because we would love to hear from you. And any comments or commentary you may have about our conversation, your feedback makes a difference, and we always value and appreciate it. I am so thrilled to have one of the most transformational leaders of our time join us today. In our business, we sometimes use words and they really don't mean anything. But when I say Derrick Johnson is transformational, and when I say he's a friend, I really do mean it. A Mississippi fella, graduate of Tougaloo College, just like Benny Thompson, law school graduate, had a major appointment early on in his career by the governor of Mississippi, has done tremendous things. His body of work is a prime example. Is you do not have to be loud to make noise. But Derrick has just tore up the NAACP, made NAACP recalibrate to meet the needs of today. And I'm just so thrilled that he has taken the time to join us to have this discussion, because I do believe we're living through perhaps some of the most consequential issues of our day, and we need leaders like Derrick Johnson to help guide us through these issues. So Derrick, welcome to the Christian Recorder Dialogue. Thank you for the opportunity. It's good to see you this morning. Thank you. Thank you. Derrick, if we were in person, I would probably start out our conversation as they do in South Carolina. Oh, where would we be without the NAACP? I'm thankful that I was taught at a very young age the relevance of the NAACP, and thankfully it was maybe 5 to 7 years ago I became a lifetime member. You are now the national president of the NAACP. You've been in that role for several years. For people who may not know the testimony of Derrick Johnson, give us the Sunday school version of your background. Well, when you say Sunday school version, you talking about AME Sunday school version or the Baptist Sunday school version, because, it could be different. First of all, I want to thank the AME Church for the opportunity to join you this morning. And like Antoine said, I'm the president and CEO of the NAACP. I've been in this position 3 years this past October. But my journey with NAACP has gone far beyond that. I actually started when I was an undergrad. Attended Tougaloo College, is where I finished from, after coming to Mississippi from Detroit. One of the things that I'm most proud about, because I am a part of that generation of reverse migration, of those of us who had families to migrate north, but some of us decided to come to school in the South, to an HBCU. Perhaps the best decision I could have made, because it opened up my understanding of what is possible, my understanding of the value of our Black institutions, my understanding around the commitment that I had to make to the community that have given so much to me personally and have provided so much to all of us. It is in that vein that I serve in this seat, and I have been engaged in NAACP from that point, whether I was the college chapter president, the state youth in college president for Mississippi. From there, after getting back out of law school, I served for the local branch. I became the state president for Mississippi NAACP, ultimately becoming the vice chair of the board of directors. And the beautiful thing about that journey, it allowed me to understand how our institutions need to be nurtured in a way that we can project into the future, not simply relying on the laurels of the past. And that's a testimony not only for the NAACP, that is a testimony for all of our institutions. Where will we be without the NAACP? But most importantly, where would we be if it wasn't for our institutions, the AME Church, AMEZ Church, the CME Church, the National Baptist Convention USA, National Baptist Convention of America,
all of our institutions, the 37 UNCF HBCUs, the Thurgood Marshall HBCUs that are state colleges. These are the institutions that sustain us, and it's in that vein that I serve in this seat, and I'm proud to join the AME this morning.
That's powerful, Derrick. Derrick, speaking of the church, speaking of AME Church, from your life experiences and from your journey, particularly where you sit now, what role you think has the church played in helping shape not only the movements we've had in this country, but I would probably say the American experiment? And what role do you see the church playing going forward, in particular the AME Church, in helping shaping the work we know we need and have to have in order to make this country what it needs to be?
Well, the role of the church, particularly AME Church, have always played that center of moral gravity for the Black community, and allowed us to develop a compass on how to navigate through storms and realities where everything was arrayed against us. From the founding of the AME Church, the bold statement that was made that we would not be treated like second-class human beings as we journey through our Christian experience, to break away, to say we can establish our own reality and set an example, a model. That's what the AME Church did for so many in the religious community. Organized denominations followed that tradition and began to establish their sense of agency as they created the moral center for our community. Really important. Looking forward, it is imperative that the church continue to do that. It is imperative that when we have times where we need credible information on how to navigate terrains where individuals are against us, the church is that gathering point. Having the ability to establish a compass so we can discern right for wrong, good or bad, so we can navigate strategically on how we're going to show up in this democracy that has not always been kind to us, while at the exact same time gathering us so we can leverage our collective currency called the vote.
Got it. Derrick, I flirted with it in the beginning. You really dated your kind of journey. What role has your faith played in kind of shaping and molding who President Derrick Johnson has become?
Growing up in the church, and unfortunately, I'm not AME, I'm Baptist, right? But growing up in the church,
you still got time, Derrick.
Well, hey, we all have a journey to make, right? We all got a journey, right? But growing up in that environment and me being able to see what was possible within our community, our ability to not only convene, but to do so in an organized manner and progress forward. And I was one of those kids in the church that if it opened early, I was there. If it closed late, I was there. If it opened through the week, I was there. I was in the choir, couldn't sing. I was at Bible study. Half the time, wasn't paying attention. I was there because that's the kind of family I came from. But in that place of safety, it also allowed me to understand the dynamics of our people, the hardship they were confronted with, and to also understand and appreciate the love that others gave to our people as they went through that process. That's foundational for me. Growing up in Detroit, going from there and watching the first Black mayor of the city, Coleman Young, how he would navigate in the midst of so many people coming against Black folks in the city of Detroit, and him knowing foundationally it was the Black church across the city that was a safety net to ensure that our political power can be felt. Leaving Detroit, getting to Tougaloo, and recognizing that college that was started by Christians was also foundational for us to understand in this journey is through our organized efforts, whether it's the church and otherwise, that we will progress. But more importantly, out of that experience, a profound and deep belief in my faith walk. That even when things seem difficult, if I was positioned well and prepared, things will work out. There are very few coincidences in life. That's my belief. I believe in that Joshua journey, that if you are positioned, you know the history, and you're prepared, you went through an experience, you're going to get to what was promised.
You preaching good, D. Now we just got to change you from Baptist to AME. You'll be all
I'm
right.
good, man. I'm good.
D, I mentioned this in my intro. As we would say in South Carolina when the NAACP gathers, oh where would we be without the NAACP? NAACP for you and me was almost like going to church. It was required. We had to participate. There is a certain segments of generations to come and now who think that NAACP has lost its relevancy in the fight because of these other groups that are popping up and doing whatever they're doing, making a difference, but in their own way. What would you say about the relevance of the NAACP and why it's important?
So NAACP, we're a unique organization, 112 years old, not as old as most of our denominations, especially the AME, but because we are younger than some of our church denominations, our governance structure was based on two realities. One from the Baptist church, congregational led, and then secondly from the Methodist churches, AME, MEZ, and CME, the table bishops. If you look at our structure, that's how we're structured. That our members on the ground have a voice in the policy priorities and directions of the organizations. And they leverage that voice and they register their collective voices at our convention, at our gathering, because we believe in that congregational-led process. But at the exact same time, we have a board of directors. And people say, oh, that board is too big. No, the board is the perfect size because it allows for representative governance. It allows for all of our experiences to show up at the table. When I have a board member from Honolulu, Hawaii, and Connecticut, they'll tell you that span the range of the Black experience. But at that table, we're able to also convene and discuss to make sure what's been adopted is consistent with a strategic approach that's important. Why did I give that example when you talk about relevancy? We are as relevant as the members on the ground who meet month to month in our local units because it's on the ground, that experience that collectively inform what we do. We don't send the edict down and then people conform. We actually receive it coming up from the ground experience. So if I have retired teachers that make up a branch, guess what the policy priority for that area is? It will be education. If I have people who live in the backyard of a nuclear reactor, guess what focus is going to be? It's going to be environmental justice. That's the sum total of all of our experiences. The relevancy really is what we make it to be. Final point on that. Social justice is not a competition. The NAACP is but a vehicle for voice. It is my job, it is our job that if we have young people who seek to use another vehicle for their voice to make an impact, it is our job to protect their right to do so and support their ability to be effective. And if we do that right, our relevancy goes for years at a time. We have never been a community with one organization to speak for everybody because that's not possible. We're not a monolith. But we must be an organization to make room for voices at the table who are speaking because we love our people and we want to make sure the society we live in respect our community.
Derrick, you've done a tremendous job. And I don't say that because you're on this camera. I say that in private, and now I'm saying it to you in public. What do you think your term, however long it lasts, I hope it's not ending anytime soon, what do you think your term will be defined as?
I hope my tenure is defined as the inflection point where we retooled and equipped for another 112 years. That during my tenure is not about me as an individual, it's about the health of the organization to be a vehicle for voice for our community. The thing that kills movements in the Black community is egocentric leadership. Community-centric leadership has always sustained us. The thing that killed us in our movement is when we set a us versus us proposition. The thing that sustained us is an intergenerational approach that respects the voices of all who come to the table, who love the people. Because if you love the people, you won't betray the people. And egocentric leadership sets it up is about the individual. And when that individual is no longer in the scene, people get complacent and they looking for the next person that's going to come. But in my belief, that the Creator put a little something in all of us. And that little something in all of us, if we put it together, is the best representation of what the Creator wants us to do. Love with all our mind and heart, and love neighbor. And love is an action word. And through that action, we must collectively do good for our neighbor.
Derrick, I'm in DC. Things are really on edge today because there was an expected attempt to repeat what happened on January 6th. My mentor and friend Benny Thompson filed a lawsuit about what happened on January 6th when domestic terrorists took over our capital and literally could have pulled the safety pin out, and a lot of things could have fallen apart. Talk about the lawsuit and what you think that means for those of us who may not have been at the Capitol, but got to live through the everyday experience of these people interacting in our communities, doctors, lawyers, restaurant owners, all these people, they make up the domestic terrorists that went to the Capitol.
You know, you and I, we're coming out of a blessed experience to have mentors and individuals who invest in us so we can sit in the positions that we're sitting in. You were with Clyburn and many others, and me with Chairman Thompson and many others. And out of that, we began to recognize that we're part of a continuum, that the movement started well before we were born. And if we do this right, we will continue to fight well after we're no longer in this place. And in that continuum, we must recognize the history by which that brought us here. And when we witnessed January 6th, that was the same thing that happened, different variations, during the period where we fought a civil war, where individuals decided who was legitimate and who was not legitimate in terms of their human selves and or their citizenship. And I watched that event on January 6th. Congressman Thompson, we are in the 8th year of a leadership program where we bring together people from across the state of Mississippi, and they have to read over a 9-month period so that we all have a common base of knowledge as we replenish the progressive Black network in the state. And the first book is this book called Redemption. And in that book, it talked about that period after Reconstruction where former Confederate soldiers created a whole strategy to knock out that period of Reconstruction to reassert what they thought was their supremacy. And in that experience, members of the United States Congress who were from the South were being intimidated. They were being threatened. And you had Black members from South Carolina, from Alabama, and from Mississippi and a few other places who were being threatened. So Congress adopted an act called of 1871, commonly known as the Ku Klux Klan Act. And in that act, it says that if any member of Congress who are carrying out their duties are being threatened under intimidations or harm or being prevented from carrying out their duty, can bring civil actions against those who are causing harm or threat. What we seen on January 6th was members of Congress carrying out their duties and an attempt by the former president in a conspiracy plan with several others, Proud Boys, 3% and so many others, to prevent Congress from certifying the election. It fits neatly into the act. That act has not been needed to be executed in over 150 years. And NAACP, we filed on behalf of our client, Congressman Thompson, because he was a member of Congress who they were trying to impede his ability to carry out his act. Now, here is where it gets good. Other members have now signed up, and we're going to be announcing that several other members who are also going to be plaintiffs in this lawsuit. But most importantly for the NAACP, we begin to see the trend. The trend has always been in this country that if terrorists, domestic terrorists, which have primarily been rooted in white supremacist dogma. If we don't hold them accountable for their activities, we can be assured that more terroristic actions will take place. We've seen that in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s in the Black community with white supremacist groups terrorizing our community. We also seen this trend that if you don't hold people account, the narrative shift and they talk about let's all sit down and get along, let's heal the nation, let's bring people together. You cannot heal a nation until you hold people accountable for the wrong that has been done. And once accountability is on the table and being addressed, then you could talk about healing. But if you slap someone one time, you go to healing before you heal the face, then you could be assured that you'll get slapped again.
That's a word. That's a word for the house. Derrick, Sunday, my uncle is the bishop in Alabama. The Bloody Sunday anniversary will be virtual this year, but people cross that bridge so that you and I can have a bridge to get to the voting booth. You know, I get in trouble for saying a lot of things on TV, but I'm unapologetic when I say voting rights is the most consequential issue of our day, like it was the most consequential issue of my sharecropping grandparents' day. Talk to us about Sunday school version, where we've been, comes to voting rights, where we are, and now we know 33 states, 265 bills, I think, to further suppress our votes. Give us some background color on where we're headed if we're not careful.
So, you think about voting rights, and I'm glad you framed it that way. The journey for African Americans in this country is to be recognized as full citizens. The currency of recognition is voting. In a democracy, our vote is our currency. And what we must continue to do is collectively pool our currency for policymakers and policies that best reflect the needs and interests of our community. And African Americans, we've done that effectively. Let no one tell you differently. No one stick together the way we stick together when it comes to voting. No one votes consistently aligned the way African American communities. Other communities envy how we vote together. 88%, 87%, 92%, 99%. Depending on the nature of the elections and the candidates. Yeah, we may split up when there's two Black candidates running, and we may even split up every so often when there's two white candidates coming in the same party. But at the end of the day, for that general elections, you can be assured that we're going to vote as a collective whole. The real issue here is whether or not we're going to vote at a higher or lower percentage, which determine the outcome of so many elections. That's the currency. The history of how people have fought to prevent us from leveraging our currency is really, really key here. Because in voting, it is about democracy. But this democracy is based on an economic system called capitalism. And when democracy is strong and we fully participate, you can hold capital in check and make sure the distribution of resources is more equitable. It ain't been equitable yet, but it's more in some cases than others. But when democracy is weak and capital strong, people get exploited. Slavery, people get exploited. Sharecropping, people get exploited. Exclusionary policies where Black and white are paid differently. People get exploited when democracy weak, capital strong. And so if you look at the history, they have fought harder around our ability to vote because the capital class don't want to be held accountable because it's about money. Who gets taxed? Who's not taxed? What those tax dollars are spent on? It's about money. What's the cost of labor and which labor groups can we best exploit? That's what this thing has been about. What we are witnessing right now is the capital class appreciating a tax cut that Trump gave them. Now they are in fear because the Black community has risen up in ways in which was not expected. In South Carolina, that's why Biden is in the White House. In Georgia, that's why you had two people elected. Black vote has raised up in Wayne County, Michigan. Therefore, there was no question that Michigan was won. Black folks raised up in Milwaukee. Therefore, Well, Wisconsin is not even on the table anymore. Black folks rose up in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County. And all because of that, you see many of these states are now trying to implement laws to suffocate the Black vote so we don't hold capital accountable to ensure that our communities appreciate the wealth that we have built in this country.
That's a nice way of framing it, but it's also a good segue to my next question. You said it in a different way. The most loyal voting bloc in a generation, Black voters, have always shaped movements in this country, including presidential elections. We saw that happen in this last election. I think there are a lot of people who did a lot of work in helping engage, educate, and turn out the African American vote. One of those groups was NAACP, thanks to your leadership. Talk to us about some of the work you all did in making sure that we were educated and prepared voters.
Well, one of the things when I walked in the door, I realized that our inability to be effective and measured in 2016 was some of the calculus of what happened that created an opportunity for the former president to serve in the White House. So I walked in the door understanding that we must develop a disciplined, metrically driven program where we can test methodologies to engage our voters and understand that the transaction of one election isn't building power in our community, that the game of civic engagement is over an arc of years. And so a 5-year plan was put in place in 2017, looking at special elections. What are the methodologies that are out there that's being tested? And how do we find a jurisdiction to test it? How do we metrically engage our members and measure whether or not we're being effective? We put together a whole data scientist team. We looked at our database systems. We upgraded those systems. We put them in place. We tested some things. One of the things we tested called relational organizers. The thing that moved people more than anything else is neighbor talking to neighbor. How can we deploy a program that way? And then in that deployment, let's look at 2018 and identify the areas we want to do it so that we can see, can this be effective? Coming back, looking at the messaging, who's talking to our community, what channels are they talking through, and how will our communities respond? Using the lessons from 2017, 2018, special elections, and 2019 led us to 2020. And out of that, we narrowed down 12 states, and within those states, areas where we see that we can move the needle 5 to 7% of Black voters who voted in the past but didn't vote in 2016, infrequent voters. And we moved that needle by 5 to 7% of them in these targeted areas. Can we make an outcome in the election? In every single of these areas, based on the data we've gotten back, we measured who do we talk to, how do we talk to them, and did those individuals go vote? We're showing a huge return on our investment. It was a $16 million program. It was an aggressive program. We talked to more Black voters than any other Black organization in the country, and we did it in a targeted way. We impacted local elections, district attorney races. The district attorney who refused to bring charges against the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery was unelected. We put somebody in office there. We looked at statewide races. We looked at congressional races. We are off to the races as we prepare for 2022 now.
Derrick, Mr. President, you made a difference. So anybody who questioned the work you all are doing, you can pinpoint to this election cycle. And for everybody who made a contribution towards the effort, thank you, because it made a difference. You're right, because you and I have had some private conversations about the work you all were doing, and it's made a difference. Speaking of making a difference and speaking of the election, and I'm gonna go back to the Biden administration engagement, but I want to talk about the constituencies that fall up under the Black vote. I've been saying it since 2016 when my client lost in the 2016 election. I saw the results. We had 13% at the time Black men vote for Trump. That number bumped up this election cycle. On one side of the equation, all under the Black vote umbrella. On the other side, you have perhaps the most dominant voter bloc in the country, Black women, continue to do their thing, continuing to be the glue holding our communities, our households, but also the Democratic Party, and I would probably say American politics and the country together. Going forward, Mr. President, what are we going to have to do to recalibrate, to get Black men on the right track, but also to show Black women that they're valued and appreciated for the work they continue to do? And how do we keep them engaged and involved?
So a couple of things here. One, because when we unpack this, I only have these conversations internal to our community because I'm not going to let anybody outside our community say that Black men doesn't show up. There is no stronger voting bloc compared to Black men except Black women. There are none.
Yeah.
There's not a single voting bloc stronger than the voting bloc of Black men. So we got to lift that up, and we got to keep saying that we are doing some things great. But what is also telling us that we need to refine how we communicate what's at stake and what has been gained and what our opportunities are on the table. We must be very clear with this new administration. You can't ask us to turn out the vote in 2022 if we don't have anything that we can show that we delivered in the 2 years since you've been in place. And it's good to have an administration that look like America, but we're talking about Black folks now. And if we're talking about Black folks, what are you delivering? Because you'll be able to measure what you deliver to the business community. You can break out the sectors. You'll be able to measure what's been delivered to the LGBT community. You break out the sectors. You'll be able to show what you deliver to this constituency group. But for the Black community, you and I, Antoine, we must say, what are you delivering for us? Because when we go back to those same Black men, when we go back to those Black women, you got to say, what did you just do for us? Did you close the wealth gap? Did you create some job opportunities? Did you address the student loan debt crisis that has disproportionately impacted our ability to navigate in this system of credit so that we can purchase homes and cars? What did you do for us? That's what you and we got to work on in these 2 years. So when we get to 2022 and they're going to come to us, they're going to go to Whip Clyburn, they're going to go to any number of churches and ask pastors, can you help us turn out the Black vote? And we say, well, that's possible, but what did you do? And that's the point we're at now. We need to ask the question, what are you doing? What did you do? And if you need help, we have about 14 months. We're sitting here to help you get it done.
Derrick, Mr. President, I have dedicated my heart and soul to the engagement of the Black vote in general. But I am really ramped up my efforts since 2016. I'm going to keep doing this cycle about Black men because I just think that if we're not careful, we're going to let a constituency slip away, and they will not even realize the long-term danger that could mean for our communities if we don't get people voting in their right interests. And so that is a personal mission of mine. And I hope that you will help join in the fight and we can collide to really make a difference.
Absolutely.
But you talked about the Biden administration. Cedric Richmond always reminds me, in fact, he reminded me last night, you cannot govern if you do not win. We won. They're starting to govern. With governing has to come accountability. So what does engagement from the NAACP perspective, what does that look like with this new administration? Or what will it look like?
Well, what it looked like, right? We came out the gate. First of all, when we realized one of our counterparts requested a meeting with the president-elect at that time, and 3 weeks later, they had not responded. In fact, 3 weeks later, they had not responded to a couple of things that Whip Clyburn asked for. And so he came out hard to raise the question. All of a sudden, he got a meeting. And when I looked, I said, didn't you request a meeting for us to have? So one of my counterparts and said, yeah, so what happened? I said, okay. I came out hard. I said, we have not met with the president, and we need somebody who's going to hold a portfolio of racial equity czar. I was less concerned about the who. I want to know about the what. Because what we're confronted with is the lack of equity in terms of our community. Not being equal, equity. And in that, that's the whole of government. That's not one position that they give us an appointment to a cabinet and say, see, we gave y'all Black folks that. No, we created an opportunity for you to be governance over all of government. And our experience is all of government, and our tax dollars are paying for all of government. Therefore, we want equity across all of government. Secondly, as people were being considered, we began to have ongoing dialogue around this equity question, whether it was the Secretary of Ag or Secretary of Transportation or Secretary of Defense. And it's been robust conversation that's been ongoing. And then thirdly, as you and I have a good friend that's sitting in the West Wing, we're talking almost every day. What about this? What do you think about this? This ain't gonna go well because if this go, why are we gonna make noise? It's that ongoing engagement, knowing that you never get everything you want in a game of politics, but if you don't ask for anything, you can be assured you won't get anything.
I totally agree. And the good news is we have people who know our names and we know their numbers. And so they know when we're calling and they know we want to be helpful, but we also have a role to play on the outside is making sure that they deliver on what they said. Because, you know, as I said, I get criticized for saying a lot of things, but in this last election, Mr. President, I said, this election is going to be about life or death for so many communities, particularly those that look like ours, because the people and the decisions made are going to determine whether certain communities live or die. And so whatever this administration decides to do, it's going to have impact on a lot of places, but it will have generational impact on some of the more consequential communities, in particular Black and Brown. And so speaking of Black and Brown, this pandemic, the worst pandemic since 1918, caused some of the worst economic challenges since 1932, disproportionate impact on Black and Brown communities. Mr. President, we, as you know, we are less likely to be tested, less likely to be treated, more likely to be on the front line doing essential work or essential jobs, more likely to die, more likely to get the virus, and now we know less likely to get the vaccine. Talk about, from the NAACP perspective, what COVID has meant, and from your own words, the impact you've seen it had on Black people.
Well, you know, COVID for me is very similar to Hurricane Katrina when it hit. It exposed the inequities that were already there. It exposed the underlying conditions that so many in our community suffered from because of the inequitable healthcare system. It exposed the nature of our work in that, in fact, we are frontline workers and critical workers, but we receive the least amount of protection. It exposed, on the other side of that, that the fastest segment of small business ownership, African-American small businesses over the prior 10 years, were being disproportionately impacted because we were not prepared for a virtual living arrangement. For far too many years, our institutions talked about a digital divide, and we couldn't, do things on using technology because our people were not technologically savvy. Only to find out that our people were more savvy than we realized, and we underinvested in our infrastructure. Therefore, churches that were ready to go on platforms to hold service, they're growing. And those congregations that were not as prepared, it took them a little while to get up and going. Our branches who were already positioned to do stuff online, they began to see an increase in membership, where my branches who were not prepared, it took them a little longer to get started. We also recognize this concept of what we can do. We have to break out that mold because there's so much more we can do virtually now, so that much of how we see ourselves and how we must figure out ability to navigate post-COVID has to be with technology in the Black community. We also recognize that the infrastructure that should be in place in far too many of our communities, particularly rural communities, must be beefed up. The most fascinating thing, Antoine, and a lot of people don't know this, that the electric providers, particularly in the Southeast region, we have the investor-owned electric companies, and those great. We know them. It's Duke and Southern Company, whether it's Georgia Power and Alabama Power and a few others. But a large percentage, upwards of 40% of electric use is coming from ratepayer-owned electric cooperatives. That means individuals who pay the bill to their cooperative also are owners. And we got to get more Black folks involved in the election of those boards of directors so we can control those electric companies. Because those electric companies are not regulated. They don't have to put anything out to bid. And these are multi-billion-dollar operations collectively. And in the Southeast region, across South Carolina, in Florida, in Georgia, in Alabama, in North Carolina, in Mississippi, here are electric companies we actually own and don't even know we own it. But it's through those electric companies that we can build out a broadband infrastructure to speed up our connectivity. COVID has created some harm, but it's also positioning for some opportunity. And as opposed to rest only on the deficit of the harm, let's look at the surplus of the opportunity.
Derrick, I got one more question, but I got a question before my one more question. Staying on the vaccine. There's this narrative out there about distrust, mistrust with Black people in the vaccine. You say what to that? And speak to, if you can, because I wrote about this a few weeks ago.
We should never allow people to define a reality for us, and that hesitancy reality has taken root. It's a deficit mindset. Tell you what the problem with the vaccine is access. You give access to our folks, and we'll see how hesitant they are because they showing up and they getting the shots. Because we all recognize in this moment that we have to do something to get out of this situation. And as the vaccine are being deployed across the country, we have to demand access for people to get vaccinated. And so for our narrative, we started with the hesitant narrative until we started doing some research and realized that it's not about hesitancy, it's about access. Mm-hmm. If you give access, people in our community, we show up and we get vaccinated. Therefore, we got to make sure that there are opportunities at our churches, in our communities, at the places we congregate, where we can line up and get the vaccine. Because what we're witnessing is in areas where it's set up for us and we don't show up, people from outside of our community, they're coming into our community and getting the vaccines that were designed for us to take.
100%. You hit it on the head. And thank God the AME Church is stepping up to the plate in partnership and opening up their doors so that they can be houses for people to visit to get their vaccine and get the fuel they need, because we have to get vaccinated. Final question, Mr. President. I know you're a busy man. There are a lot of issues that deem important, but not a lot of issues make it to be a priority. Going forward, what do you see as, and we'll say three, one for the Father, one for the Son, one for the Holy Ghost, the three perhaps most important issues going forward that you think we face as a community of Black people?
Well, priorities. One, the attack on our ability to vote. They're trying to limit access to the polling place. So we got to prioritize how do we stop that and open it back up. It's a fight that we must take on. It's going to be difficult, but any fight worthwhile will always be difficult. And we know when we fight, we win. Is when we don't fight, is when we lose. Secondly, got to close this wealth gap. It is growing. It continues to grow. One of the things we narrowed down on is that the number one employer of African Americans is government, whether it's county, city, state, school district, federal, and far too many of our people who are employed through government also went to college and they took out student loans, and 20 years later they're still paying on their student loans. We need a mechanism to discharge those student loans so we can close the wealth gap, because as soon as you do that, you put more money back into our economy, but more importantly, you erase the burden that so many people are carrying on their balance sheet, their personal balance sheet, so that now they can qualify to do large home purchases and other large items. Therefore, the number one creator of wealth in our community in this country has always been the purchase of homes. So we gotta close the wealth gap. And one of the ways that we're focusing on is discharging the student loan burden that's disproportionately saddling our community. And then finally, looking at ways to increase more jobs in our community through this infrastructure package that's going to pass both House and Senate. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, but before you know it, there's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure package passed to improve on roads and other infrastructure. And we're going to be fighting hard to make sure that there's enough teeth in those packages to get jobs in our community. Whether it's the conservation core concept that's going to be moving, or just the repairs of road, bridges, and others, we got to make sure that we are front and center to get that money to employ our people so we can have jobs, closing the wealth gaps, creating more jobs, and most importantly, fighting so they don't close access to the ballot box.
Mr. President, what can the AME Church do? Everybody who's watching this from all over the world, what can the AME Church do to make certain that those realities that we face do not continue to be challenges going forward?
Well, tremendous sway that the church community have, particularly AME Church, with the policymakers who are going to be making these decisions. Whether it's Tim Scott right there in South Carolina, or G.K. Butterfield in North Carolina. We have to push all of our policymakers to move in the right directions, and that goes across party lines. At the end of the day, the outcome of the public policy adopted should impact people. Partisanship is a distraction in many of these cases, and political parties are only agendas for interest groups to drive, to utilize, to navigate through a process. And so the board is set. We know who's in what party. We know who have what philosophy. The AME Church, we need to play the whole board and pick up the phone and push everybody. If Lindsey Graham, is he in office, he in South Carolina, that's a conversation to him. We can't write him off. I mean, he's slippery and he'll tell a lie in a minute, but we still got to be in his ear to make sure when the opportunity presents itself that our voices are heard and the AME Church is as strong a voice in the Black community as any other voice.
Mr. President, as we say, as I have learned, the two most important words in the English language are thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for standing in the gap when people try to make sure you sit. Thank you for being a friend of the AME Church. And thank you for helping our community because we all have a role to play. And your role is what some would describe as one of those big roles, but it's a needed and necessary role. So we thank you for your time.
So thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate this moment to speak on this platform.
Thank you. John Thomas, I'm going to turn it back over to you, the chief editor of the Christian Recorder.
They were bringing me in and out. Thank you all again. Again, thank you, Antoine. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here on this program, and we look forward to hearing from you all in the future. We bring him back. He dipped out. Bring him back in. Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
I said I meant to turn off my chime on my door. People's coming in and out. I hope you can edit that out.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. We're live. People are. We've had a whole lot of other things happen. Thank you again.
Oh, y'all live. All right.
Yes,
Take
sir.
care, man. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for joining us for another edition of these dialogues. Our following announcements. Our next dialogue will be March the 9th at 6 p.m. with Stacey Abrams and Bishop Reginald Jackson. You do not want to miss that dialogue. We will be having a special dialogue with Stacey Abrams, Bishop Jackson. We listened, y'all asked for it, and we made it happen. So please do join us for that time. Also, you heard earlier today the mention of the Bloody Sunday commemoration. That will be done this Sunday, and you can watch the commemoration live on the 9th Episcopal District Facebook channel. Once again, you can watch that live on the 9th Episcopal Facebook channel this Sunday, and we encourage you to join Bishop Seawright, Senior Bishop Richardson, and the guests. We thank you for supporting the Christian Recorder, and as always, we encourage you to help us out. We've been doing these programs for the last couple of months, and we always encourage you to help us. We still print, and we still send newspapers, and we encourage you to buy a subscription. It's only $36. Price hasn't changed in over a decade, and we hope that you will keep supporting us so that we can continue to keep the price the same way it is. We also encourage you to support the AME Church Publishing House for your church, school, and worship needs. Please visit amecpublishing.com. And we also encourage you to note that the Lenten resource materials are up now. Yes, the resource materials for Lent are up. You need to go to iamame.org to get them. And if you have not purchased your religion devotional yet, please do so. They're available now electronically. All the print copies have been sold. Our sponsors for today's broadcast are Eldridge for Treasurer 2021, Eldridge 2021, and Ida Heights for Judicial Council 2021. Ida Heights Hill for Judicial Council 2021. Once again, thank you for joining us for this discussion between Antoine C. Wright and Derrick Johnson. Don't miss us next week when we have Stacey Abrams at 6 p.m. on Tuesday. And thank you again for supporting us. Till next time, thank you and God bless.